DeMarcus Little's phone rang as he was finishing work on the old Ford's carburetor. Rust was embedded in the metal like time in his own life, slowly but inexorably. The bell interrupted the monotonous whirring of tools in the machine shop where DeMarcus had worked for the past 23 years. "Little here," he said, wiping his hands with an oily rag. "Minus Mr. Little. This is Dr. Tate." The voice on the other end sounded tense. "I need to talk to you about an important matter. Personal. Would you mind coming into my office after work today?" DeMarcus frowned. Dr. Obadiah Tate had been their family doctor for almost 2 decades. He didn't usually call without a reason. "Is there something wrong with Shanice?" he asked quickly, feeling his heart clench. "I'd prefer to discuss it in person, Mr. Little. When will you be able to come in?" Something in the doctor's voice made DeMarcus immediately agree. "I'll be at your place at 5. He hung up the phone and tried to concentrate on his work, but his mind kept returning to the strange call. He and Shanice had been married for 30 years. All they'd been missing was children. Years of trying, tests, disappointments, and now some urgent conversation. At 4:50, DeMarcus was already sitting in the waiting room of Dr. Tate's clinic. Nurse Evelyn nodded to him. "He's waiting for you, Mr. Little. Come on in." Dr. Tate looked older than his 65 years. His always neat white coat was now wrinkled, and his eyes looked tired from under heavy lids. "DeMarcus, thank you for coming." The doctor pointed to a chair. "Please, have a seat." "What's wrong, Doc?" DeMarcus couldn't take it anymore. "Is it Shanice?" Tate stared at him for a long moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "What I'm about to tell you, it's complicated," he finally began. "I've known your family for years. I've seen you and Shanice trying to have children." "What's your point, Doc?" Dr. Tate took a deep breath. "Shanice can't have children, DeMarcus. She never could. Not for the reasons you think." "We know about infertility," DeMarcus replied irritably. "We've been through all those tests." "No," the doctor shook his head. "It's not about infertility in the usual sense. Shanice..." He hesitated, searching for words. "Shanice was born a man. She is a transgender woman." Time had stopped. DeMarcus stared at the doctor, hearing the blood pounding in his temples. "What the hell are you talking about?" he almost whispered. Then his voice grew stronger. "What kind of sick joke is this?" "It's the truth, DeMarcus. I'm sorry." 30 years, DeMarcus said. "We've been married 30 years. I would have known." "Modern medicine works wonders," Tate said quietly. "Hormone therapy, surgeries, especially if the transition was made young. Shanice went through it before you met her." "I don't believe you." DeMarcus stood up, his hands shaking. "Show me the proof." Tate silently opened a desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder labeled Shanice Little. He flipped through a few pages and unfolded the document to DeMarcus. "It's all here, including the original birth certificate in Sean Carter's name." DeMarcus grabbed the papers. His eyes ran frantically over the lines of medical terms, dates, procedures. Where it should have said female in the gender column, there was male, corrected to female, with a notation of a legal change of gender. Everything was documented, including surgeries and hormone therapy. That's impossible," he whispered, but the proof was in front of him, black and white. "She's been deceiving me all this time." Dr. Tate folded his hands on the table. "DeMarcus, there's something else you should know." Little raised a devastated look at him. "I knew about it. I've known it all these years." Shock turned to incomprehension, then slowly to anger. "You knew? And you didn't tell me?" "I'm bound by doctor-patient confidentiality." The doctor looked guilty. "Shanice was a patient of mine, but it's more than that. Ia helped maintain that secrecy." "What do you mean?" DeMarcus's voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "When you started taking the fertility tests, the results were falsified. I did it for Shanice. She was afraid of losing you if you found out the truth." The room started spinning before DeMarcus's eyes. 30 years. 30 years of lies. All those disappointments when the pregnancy test turned out negative. All those visits to doctors. All those conversations about a future child. "Why now?" he asked hoarsely. "Why are you telling me this now?" Dr. Tate looked 10 years older. I have cancer, DeMarcus, terminal. I have a few months to live. He smiled weakly. I want to leave with a clear conscience. Undo at least some of the damage I've done. Undo? DeMarcus felt something break inside him. You took away my choice, both of you. 30 years. I could have adopted a child. I could have found another woman. I understand your anger, Tate said quietly. But please think of Shanice. She loves you. She's always been afraid of losing. Don't you dare, DeMarcus interrupted him, standing up. Don't you dare tell me how she feels. You've both lied to me for decades, played me for a fool. Something caught his eye, a heavy onyx paperweight on the doctor's desk. Before he realized what he was doing, his hand clutched the cold stone. Mr. Little, please, the doctor rose, putting his hands out in front of him. I understand your feelings, but... The blow was swift and hard. Tate collapsed to the floor, blood gushing from the wound on his temple. DeMarcus froze, staring at his hand, still clutching the bloody paperweight. Oh God, he whispered, coming to his senses. Oh God. He leaned over, felt for a pulse. Nothing. Panic gripped him. What had he done? What now? With trembling hands, DeMarcus grabbed Shanice's file folder and stuffed it under his jacket. Then he looked around the office. The nurse had seen him enter. Need to act quickly. He wiped the paperweight and his fingerprints on the doorknob, then slipped out the back door of the clinic. Fortunately, it was already dark and no one had seen him leave. Once in the car, DeMarcus realized he couldn't go home in this condition. He called Lamont. Old man, are you busy? I need a drink. The Blue Oyster Bar had always been their spot, a small, smoky establishment on the outskirts of Accomack that served the strongest whiskey around. Lamont Gaines, a huge man with kind eyes, was already waiting at their usual table. You look like shit, D, he said frankly as DeMarcus sank heavily into a chair. I feel even worse. DeMarcus took a swig of the whiskey he offered. Pour another. What's wrong? Problems with Shanice? At the mention of his wife's name, DeMarcus shuddered. I don't want to talk about it. 30 years together and you still love her like a teenager. Lamont grinned. Some people are lucky. Lucky, echoed DeMarcus, pouring himself a third glass. You know, I've wanted kids all my life, as long as I can remember. I know, brother. Lamont put a hand on his shoulder. But you and Shanice have built a good life. Many can only dream of such a marriage. DeMarcus laughed bitterly. If you only knew, he wanted to say more, but stopped himself. Pour some more. By 11 o'clock, DeMarcus could hardly stand. Lamont hailed a cab and practically shoved his friend into the back seat. Take care of yourself, D. No matter what happens, there's always a way out. DeMarcus nodded, already falling into a half-sleep from the alcohol. The house greeted him with light in the windows. Shanice was waiting, sitting in the living room chair. She looked up as he stumbled in. DeMarcus? What's wrong? You smell like whiskey for a mile. He looked at her, slender, with beautiful features, the same brown eyes that had once long ago won his heart. For 30 years he had slept beside this woman, shared her bed, her dreams, her secrets, and all the while... DeMarcus? Shanice stood up, stepped closer. You're scaring me. What happened? He could have hit her right now. He could have screamed, accused her of lying, thrown her out of the house. But suddenly all he felt was fatigue, dead tired. Nothing, he said, avoiding her gaze. Tough day. I need to lie down. Dr. Tate called you, she said suddenly. His secretary called back, asking if you were coming in tomorrow. Something about an appointment. DeMarcus froze. They don't know yet. They probably haven't found the body yet. Yeah, couldn't go. Forgot, he muttered, heading for the stairs. We'll talk in the morning. Shanice looked concerned but didn't follow him. Going up to the bedroom, DeMarcus locked the door and pulled out the folder. Half drunk, with shaky hands, he began to look through the documents in the dim light of the nightlight. Shanice's story unfolded before him, page by page. Born as Sean Carter. First signs of gender dysphoria in adolescence. Hormone therapy started in her 20s. Surgical procedures. Change of ID. And then there are the records of their visits together, the fake infertility test results, the diagnoses that never happened. His whole life has been built on lies. And now he's a murderer. DeMarcus sat clutching the documents until the pre-dawn rays began to break through the curtains. Downstairs, he could hear Shanice preparing breakfast, humming as usual. How could she? How could she keep up this spectacle? But worst of all, deep inside, he realized that despite the anger, despite the betrayal, a part of him still loved her, and that made the pain even more unbearable. The morning in Accomack was gray and dank. Evelyn Banks, a nurse at Dr. Tate's clinic, arrived for work as usual at 8 o'clock sharp. Unlocking the door and turning on the light in the waiting room, she was surprised at the silence. Dr. Tate always arrived first, an hour before opening time, to review patient charts and prepare for the day. Knocking on his office door and getting no answer, Evelyn frowned. Perhaps he was sick and forgot to give notice. That didn't sound like a pedantic doctor. Obeying a vague premonition, she opened the door. Evelyn's scream broke the morning silence of the clinic. Dr. Tate was lying on the floor near his desk, a brown stain of dried blood around his head. His eyes were open and staring lifelessly at the ceiling. Nearby lay a heavy onyx paperweight that had once stood on the doctor's desk, a gift from a grateful patient. 20 minutes later, the crime scene was swarming with police officers. Detective Lotus Brooks was the last to arrive, parking her tattered Chevy at the curb. A tall woman with short, graying hair and attentive eyes, she wore a simple business suit and looked like she'd been born with a police badge on her chest. "Good morning, Officer Pearson." She nodded to the young policeman guarding the entrance. "What do we have?" "Taktur Obadiah Tate, 65 years old," Pearson reported. "Found dead by his nurse this morning, apparently killed last night with a heavy object. The murder weapon is believed to be a paperweight found near the body." Lotus nodded silently and went inside. The body was already being examined by the medical examiner, Dr. Wilder. "Hi, Isaac." Lotus took a seat next to the body. "What do you think?" "Cause of death, blunt trauma to the head," Wilder answered without taking a break from his work. "One strong blow to the temporal region. Death was instantaneous or almost instantaneous time of death. Yesterday between 17 and 19 o'clock. I'll know more after the autopsy." "Robbery?" "I don't think so," one of the officers intervened. "Wallet's still in place, watch too." The safe in the office was untouched. Lotus looked around the room slowly. There was no sign of a struggle. Nothing had been overturned or scattered. The killer had either caught the doctor off guard or was familiar with the victim. "Had anyone talked to the nurse?" she asked. "She's in the break room," the officer nodded. "Shocked but ready to talk." Evelyn Banks, a petite woman in her 50s, sat with her hands around a cup of cooled tea. Her fingers trembled. "Minus Ms. Banks," Lotus began softly, taking a seat across from her. "I'm Detective Brooks. I need to ask you a few questions." Evelyn nodded, avoiding eye contact. "Did you see anything suspicious yesterday? Any unusual visitors? Strange behavior on Dr. Tate's part?" "No." The nurse shook her head. "The day was normal. The doctor saw patients until 5 o'clock. The last one was Mr. Little." Lotus became wary. "Minus Mr. Little?" "DeMarcus Little. He didn't have an appointment, but Dr. Tate called him himself. Said it was important. He asked me to go home after he got here. Said he'd close the clinic himself." Lotus wrote the name down in her notebook. "Do you know what they were supposed to talk about?" Evelyn shrugged her shoulders. Eli and Dr. Tate had been very secretive the last few days, after he found out about his diagnosis. Diagnosis? He had cancer, terminal. He found out about a month ago. Interesting, Lotus thought. A dying man sometimes does unexpected things, clears his conscience, settles old scores. "What can you tell me about Mr. Little?" "Just an ordinary man, mechanic, married to Shanice Little for years. They're both patients of Dr. Tate. Good people as far as I know." Lotus nodded, taking notes. "Does the clinic have any recordings of conversations with patients? Maybe Dr. Tate kept a journal?" "Of course." Evelyn pointed toward the office. "All medical records are kept in a file cabinet, and the doctor kept personal notes on his computer." Back in the office, Lotus headed for the file cabinets. Looking through the drawers in alphabetical order, she reached the letter L. The cards were neatly arranged, but between Litvak and Lloyd, there was a blank space. "That's odd," she murmured, turning to Evelyn, who was standing in the doorway. "There's no card here in Little's name." The nurse frowned. It can't be. I distinctly remember Shanice Little's card being quite thick. Dr. Tate personally handled her for years. Lotus looked around the office. If the killer had taken the medical records, then there must have been something important in them. Something related to the motive for the murder. An hour later, Lotus Brooks drove up to the Little house, a modest one-story structure with a neat front garden. The neighbor across the street, who was watering her flowers, watched curiously as the police car arrived. The door was opened by Shanice Little, a slender woman with tired eyes and beautiful, soft features. "What can I do for you?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mrs. Little? I'm Detective Lotus Brooks. I need to speak to your husband. It's about Dr. Tate." Shanice tensed, but there was no real surprise in her eyes. More like fear? "DeMarcus is at work. Johnson's auto shop on Maple Street. What happened to Dr. Tate?" "Unfortunately, he's dead," Lotus answered bluntly, watching the woman's reaction carefully. "Murdered last night in his office." Shanice turned pale, grabbing the door jamb. "Oh my God!" She looked genuinely shocked. "Who could? He was such a good man. Did you know him well? He was our family doctor for many years. She hesitated. "He did a lot for us." Something in her tone made Lotus wary. "Mrs. Little, do you have any idea why Dr. Tate called your husband in for an appointment yesterday?" Shanice turned even paler. "Yesterday? No." DeMarcus didn't say anything. He came home late, drunk. Said he was with Lamont. "Lamont? Lamont Gaines, a friend of his. They often have drinks together at the Blue Clam." Lotus nodded, making a note. "I'll stop by later when your husband's home. In the meantime, hang in there." Johnson's auto shop was a typical garage on the outskirts of town. A shabby sign, the smell of machine oil, and several cars in various stages of repair. DeMarcus Little was under the old Ford when the Lotus pulled up. "Minus Mr. Little?" she called out. A large man with an oil-smeared face and hands rolled out from under the car. When he saw the badge, he visibly tensed. "I'm DeMarcus Little. What can I do for you?" "Detective Lotus Brooks. I need to ask you some questions about Dr. Tate." DeMarcus straightened up, wiping his hands with a rag. Something flashed across his face. Fear? Guilt? But it was quickly replaced by a neutral expression. "What about Dr. Tate? He was killed last night in his office," Lotus answered bluntly. "The nurse said you were his last visitor." DeMarcus turned pale but quickly pulled himself together. "I didn't go to that meeting," he said, averting his gaze. "I forgot. I'd had a hard day, so I went out for a drink with a friend. Lamont Gaines, you can ask him." "What time did you meet Mr. Gaines?" "About 6, maybe 7:30. We sat in the bar until 11 o'clock. Lotus made a note of it. That corresponded to the time of Dr. Tate's death, but it didn't mean DeMarcus couldn't have killed him before meeting his friend. "Why did Dr. Tate want to meet with you?" "I have no idea," DeMarcus shrugged. "Something about my tests, I guess. I had a checkup last week." Lies. Lotus could see it in his eyes, in the way his shoulders tensed, but for now, she decided not to press. "Minus Mr. Little, are you sure you didn't see Dr. Tate yesterday?" "Absolutely," he answered firmly. "I was with Lamont. Ask him." "I will," Lotus nodded. "Where's the Blue Oyster?" She said goodbye, but as she left, she tossed over her shoulder. "By the way, Mr. Little, your wife's medical records have disappeared from Dr. Tate's clinic. Do you have any idea what might have happened?" DeMarcus froze, his face stony. "I have no idea," he said dryly. "I've got work to do, Detective." An hour later, Lotus was at the Style and Scissors hair salon where Shanice Little worked. The small salon in downtown Accomack was filled with the smells of hairspray and soft conversations. Shanice was finishing a haircut on an elderly client when Lotus walked in. "Detective," she smiled weakly. "I'll be free in a moment. Have a seat." Lotus watched Shanice work, the confident, polished movements, the soft smile, the easy conversation with the client. Nothing gave her away as someone whose family doctor had been murdered the day before. Finally, after seeing her client off, Shanice approached Lotus. "What can I do for you?" "Mrs. Little, I'd like to know more about your relationship with Dr. Tate." Shanice tensed, her hands trembling lightly. "He's been our doctor for many years, a good man." "Only a doctor?" Lotus asked softly. "Your medical records are missing from the clinic. Do you know anything about that? Shanice's face turned as pale as chalk. Yeah, I don't. Why would I take it? I didn't say you did it, Lotus remarked. But clearly there was something important in it. Something that could have been a motive for murder. I don't know what you mean. Shanice turned away, beginning to wipe the already clean counter nervously. There's nothing unusual about my chart. Mrs. Little, Lotus stepped closer. You and your husband had trouble conceiving children, correct? Shanice froze, her back tensing. Yes, she answered quietly. We tried for years, without success. And Dr. Tate was in charge of all your examinations? Yes, he was very helpful. It's strange that your husband didn't know anything about seeing Dr. Tate, Lotus said. Usually such important things are discussed within the family. DeMarcus works hard, Shanice replied quickly. Sometimes he forgets about appointments. That's normal. Lotus could see that Shanice was lying, saw it in her eyes in the way her hands trembled. But what exactly is she hiding? Mrs. Little, Lotus placed her business card on the counter. If you think of anything important, give me a call. Anytime. The next item on Lotus's list was Dr. Raymond Harris, a colleague and friend of the late Tate. They met at a cafe near the hospital where Harris worked. A full man with glasses and an attentive gaze. Obadiah was a good man, he said, stirring his coffee. Devoted to his work. Patients adored him. Did you know he had cancer? Yes, Harris nodded. He told me a month ago. The prognosis was bad, 6 months at the most. But he didn't want his patients to know. Worked his ass off. Dr. Harris, Lotus stepped forward. Do you know Shanice Little? The doctor hesitated, his gaze becoming wary. Yes, a little. Obadiah's patient. Just a patient? Harris sighed, taking off his glasses and wiping them with a tissue, a gesture that betrayed nervousness. Detective, I can't discuss patients. Doctor-patient confidentiality. TT Actor Harris. This is a murder case. Lotus didn't back down. If you know something. All I can tell you is that Obadiah was very attentive to Shanice Little. More attentive than the average patient, but that's all I know. Do you think there was a personal connection between them? I didn't say that, Harris replied quickly. But Obadiah was always personally involved in her case, and he often refused to discuss her with other doctors, even with me. Lotus thought for a moment. Something wasn't adding up here. A doctor personally handling a patient for years, missing medical records, a secret meeting with the patient's husband. One more question, Doctor. Harris. Did Dr. Tate have a diary? Personal notes? Yes, Harris nodded. He always kept a diary, old-fashioned paper, said it helped him structure his thoughts. Do you have any idea where he might have kept it? Probably at home. Obadiah was very sensitive about privacy. By evening, Lotus had obtained a search warrant for Dr. Tate's home, a small but well-kept cottage on the outskirts of Accomack. The doctor had no relatives. His wife had died years ago, and there were no children. The house was neat and clean, as expected of such a pedantic man. In the study on the second floor, Lotus found what she was looking for, a tattered leather diary in a desk drawer. Settling into a chair, she began to look through the latest entries. The doctor's handwriting was small but legible. March 5th. Results came back today. Just as I feared, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, 6 months, maybe less. Strangely, I'm relieved. It's like the weight of the unknown has been lifted. Lotus flipped forward a few pages. March 20th. Thinking of the secrets I'll carry with me. About other people's secrets I've kept for years. Is this the right thing to do? Do I have the right to take them to the grave? And finally, the last entry, dated the day of the murder. I'll talk to DeMarcus today. He deserves to know the truth about Shanice. 30 years of lies is too long. I've helped maintain this deception and my conscience is not clear. Maybe it's selfish to clear it at the expense of their family. But I can't leave knowing I let these lies continue. Shanice will hate me. Perhaps DeMarcus will too. But the truth must be told. Lotus closed her journal, gazing wistfully out the window at the lowering dusk. She now had proof that Dr. Tate had told DeMarcus something important about his wife. Something that had been kept secret for 30 years. Something worth killing for. She pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number. Officer Pearson, I need a search warrant for the little house. and prepare a request to access Shanice Little's medical records from other sources. I need to know what was in that missing chart. DeMarcus Little stood in the far corner of his garage, glancing nervously at his watch. It was 4 a.m. Shanice was asleep in the house, unaware that her husband hadn't slept a wink all night. The last 2 days had become a blurred nightmare. The murder, the interrogation, the constant fear of exposure. He could feel the noose slowly tightening. Detective Brooks, her penetrating gaze, the direct questions. She knew, or guessed. The only question was how much time he had left. With trembling hands, DeMarcus pulled a metal bucket from under the workbench. Then he pulled out a folder hidden under the garage floorboards, the medical records Shanice had stolen from Dr. Tate's office, proof of 30 years of lies and his own crime. He flipped through the pages slowly, in the dim light of the lamp. Sean Carter, sex change, hormone therapy, surgery, detailed medical terms, incomprehensible to the average person, but together adding up to a clear picture of deception, and infertility test reports, falsified, as Tate had admitted, to hide the real reason he couldn't have children. 30 years, DeMarcus whispered, feeling the wave of anger and bitterness rising inside him again. He threw the folder into the bucket and struck a match. The flames quickly engulfed the papers, turning the story of the deception into ashes. DeMarcus watched the fire devour the evidence and felt a strange desolation. It was as if a part of himself was burning with the documents, a part of him that believed in their marriage, in their future together. When all that was left of the documents were smoldering embers, he poured water over them and dumped the ashes in the trash can behind the garage. Looking around, DeMarcus made sure no one had seen his actions in the pre-dawn twilight. Returning to the house, he quietly made his way to the bedroom. Shanice was still asleep, her breathing even and calm. How could she sleep so serenely when their lives were falling apart? When he had become a murderer because of her lies? Looking at his sleeping wife, DeMarcus tried to see Sean Carter in her, the boy she had once been. But all he saw was Shanice, the woman he'd loved for 30 years. The woman who had deceived him all that time. He hadn't noticed Shanice had opened her eyes and was now looking at him anxiously. "DeMarcus?" Her voice was hoarse from sleep. "What's the matter? Did you even go to bed?" He remained silent, continuing to stare at her with a strange, detached look. "DeMarcus, you're scaring me." Shanice sat up in bed. "What's going on? Is this about Dr. Tate?" At the mention of the doctor's name, something broke inside DeMarcus. "What did he say to you?" Shanice asked quietly, fear appearing in her eyes. "Everything," DeMarcus answered simply. "He told me everything, Shanice, or should I call you Sean?" Shanice turned pale, her hand instinctively going to her throat. "DeMarcus, 30 years," his voice trembled. 30 years you lied to me, every day, every night." "I can explain," she whispered, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Explain?" DeMarcus laughed bitterly. "What can you explain? How you hid the fact that you were born a man? How did you let me hope for a child for years when you knew it was impossible?" "I was afraid." Shanice covered her face with her hands. "I was so afraid of losing you." "So that justifies lying?" DeMarcus clenched his fists. "Does it justify you stealing my choice? I could have adopted a child. You could have." "You never wanted to adopt," Shanice objected quietly. "You always talked about your blood, your heritage." DeMarcus fell silent because she was right. He had always dreamed of having a child of his own, of continuing the lineage. "That doesn't change the fact that you lied," he finally said. "You and Tate, you've both been lying to me for years." Shanice lifted her head, her gaze shifting. "Tate." She fell silent, as if realizing something. "You were there that night, you—" "Oh my God, DeMarcus, what did you do?" DeMarcus turned away, unable to meet her gaze. "You killed him." It was not a question, but a statement. "You killed Obadiah. He betrayed me," DeMarcus replied deftly. "For years he helped you maintain the deception, falsified test results, denied me the right to know the truth." Shanice rose slowly from the bed, her movements cautious, as if she were approaching a wild animal. "DeMarcus, listen to me. I have loved you every day of these 30 years, every minute of it. This is real. It's true." "Is it true?" He grinned bitterly. "You don't even know what it is." "I do," she said firmly. "The truth is that I'm a woman, always have been on the inside. The truth is that I fell in love with you at first sight and was afraid of losing you. The truth is that Obadiah helped me because he saw me suffer. He saw how afraid I was that you would leave if you knew. He had no right to decide for me," DeMarcus repeated stubbornly. "None of you did." "You're right." Shanice moved closer to him. "We were wrong. I was wrong. But the murder? DeMarcus, what have you done?" At that moment, there was the sound of cars pulling up outside. DeMarcus went to the window and saw 2 police cars outside their house. "They're here," he said quietly. Shanice walked over and stood beside him. "What are you going to do?" DeMarcus looked at her for a long moment, then exhaled. "I don't know." Detective Lotus Brooks got out of the first car, followed by 3 other officers. They walked determinedly toward the house. "Go open up for them," DeMarcus said. "I'll be in the garage." "DeMarcus!" Shanice grabbed his arm. "Don't do anything stupid, please." He carefully released his hand and walked out the back door. Lotus Brooks was on the doorstep when Shanice opened the door. Her face was pale but determined. "Mrs. Little," the detective nodded. "I have a warrant to search your home. Where's your husband?" "He's in the garage," Shanice answered quietly. Lotus nodded to the 2 officers and they headed toward the detached garage. "Mrs. Little, we need to talk," Lotus said as she entered the house. "We got the results of the request to the Baltimore Medical Center, and we found something interesting about you." Shanice sank down on the couch, her shoulders slumped. "You know?" "Yes," Lotus nodded. "You were born as Sean Carter, underwent a sex change procedure in your 20s before you met DeMarcus, and Dr. Tate helped you hide it from your husband." Shanice nodded silently, tears rolling down her cheeks. "He just found out," she whispered. "Tate told him 2 days ago." At that moment, a voice came from Lotus's walkie-talkie. "Detective, you should see this. It's in the dumpster behind the garage." Lotus stepped out into the yard. One of the officers was holding a burnt piece of paper in a plastic bag. "He was burning documents," the officer said. "Most of it is destroyed, but some fragments can be read." Lotus picked up the bag. On the charred piece of paper, she could still make out part of a medical form and 2 names next to it, Sean Carter and Shanice Little, connected by an arrow. "Where is Mr. Little?" she asked sharply. "He was in the garage, but he's not there right now," the second officer replied, stepping out of the structure. "We found this, though." He held out a cloth-wrapped object to Lotus. Unwrapping it, the detective saw a heavy onyx paperweight with traces of blood on it. "Put a bolo out on him," she quickly ordered. "He can't have gotten far. Check friends, relatives, and the cars at the bus station." Shanice stood in the doorway of the house, wrapping her arms around herself. "He didn't mean it," she said as Lotus approached. "He just snapped. Tate told him the truth, and then confessed that he knew all along, that he'd helped me cover it up." "Mrs. Little, I understand how you feel," Lotus interrupted her gently. "But your husband killed a man. We have to find him." DeMarcus Little was found 3 hours later at a bus station in a neighboring town. He didn't resist arrest, only nodded silently as the officers handcuffed him. In the interrogation room at the Accomack police station, DeMarcus sat motionless, staring at one point. Across from him sat Lotus Brooks, an evidence folder lying between them. "Minus Mr. Little," she began. "We found the murder weapon in your garage. It has your fingerprints and Dr. Tate's blood on it. We have burned fragments of your wife's medical records that you stole from the clinic. And we have motive. Dr. Tate revealed a secret to you that you weren't ready to hear." DeMarcus was silent, his gaze blank. "If you cooperate, it will be taken into account by the court," Lotus added. "Tell me what happened that night." DeMarcus raised his eyes to her. "He told me that my wife was born a man," he said quietly. "That 30 years of our marriage had been built on lies that she couldn't have children because," he stammered. "And then he said he knew it all along, helped her hide the truth. Falsified fertility tests, so I wouldn't know the real reason." "And you killed him," Lotus stated. "I didn't plan it." DeMarcus shook his head. "I just snapped. He said he did it out of the best of intentions, that Shanice was afraid of losing me. But for 30 years I lived a lie. I dreamed of children I could never have, and he knew. All that time, he knew, and he didn't say a word. You hit him with a paperweight. Yes, DeMarcus lowered his head. Once. I didn't even realize he was dead at first, and then it was too late. Why did you take the medical records? I don't know, he shrugged. Panic, I guess. Didn't want anyone else to know. It was an impulse. Lotus closed the folder. Minus Mr. Little, you will be charged with second-degree murder. You have the right to an attorney. If you can't afford one... I understand, DeMarcus interrupted her. I killed a man. I deserve to be punished. Your wife wants to see you, Lotus said, standing up. I'll tell the officer to let her through. Left alone, DeMarcus covered his face with his hands. How could things have turned out this way? 30 years of happy marriage, and now prison, divorce, loneliness. The door opened and Shanice walked in. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. She sat down across from DeMarcus, with a table and 30 years of shared life between them. Hi, she said quietly. Hi, he said back. There was a heavy pause. There was so much to say, but the words were stuck in his throat. I lied to you, Shanice said at last. And for that, I apologize. But I have never lied about my feelings, DeMarcus. I have loved you every day of these 30 years. Why? He asked. Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Shanice smiled sadly. When we met, I had already been living as a woman for 5 years. It was liberating. Finally, the outward appearance matched who I'd always felt I was on the inside. And then there you were, handsome, confident. You looked at me in a way that no one had ever looked at me before. I fell in love instantly. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I wanted to tell you. I almost did a few times, but each time, something stopped me. Fear, your talk of future children, and then too much time passed, and the truth seemed more and more impossible. Tate knew. It wasn't a question, but a statement. Yes, Shanice nodded. I came to him 15 years ago when we started infertility tests. I needed a doctor I could trust. He agreed to help, not out of malice, DeMarcus. He saw how much we loved each other, and he didn't want to ruin that. But he did, DeMarcus said bitterly. No, Shanice said firmly. We destroyed it ourselves. Me with my lies, you with your anger. They were silent again. It was beginning to rain outside the window, the drops drumming on the glass as if counting the passing of time. What now? DeMarcus asked. I don't know, Shanice answered honestly. I'll be around if you let me. I'll wait for you. But I will understand if you want a divorce. DeMarcus stared at the woman in front of him for a long time. 30 years they had shared a bed, dreams, plans for the future. 30 years he had loved her with all his heart. Is it possible to just cross it all off? I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again, he said quietly. But I know that no matter what, I still love you. And that's the hardest part. Shanice reached across the table, and after a second's hesitation, DeMarcus took her hand. Their fingers intertwined, a gesture repeated thousands of times over the years of their marriage. If we could start over, Shanice whispered. If I could have told you the truth that first day. We would have chosen a different path, DeMarcus finished for her. Maybe we would have adopted a child. Maybe we would have just lived together, knowing and accepting the truth. Love would have been enough for us, Shanice said. She'd always had enough. The officer opened the door, indicating that visiting time had expired. Shanice stood up but did not let go of her husband's hand. I will come, she said. Every week, if you want to see me. DeMarcus nodded, not trusting his voice. When Shanice was already at the door, he called out to her, Shanice! She turned around. I don't regret 30 years with you, he said. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that. Shanice smiled through her tears and walked out. The door closed, leaving DeMarcus alone with his thoughts. There was a trial ahead, a verdict, years of imprisonment. But in a strange way, he felt that the hardest test was over the moment when he had learned the truth and had to decide whether 30 years of love outweighed 30 years of lies. And though he did not yet know the answer, he knew in his heart that he would find it someday. They would both have to relearn to live with the truth, however painful it might be.